Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with your daily dose of doom and gloom. My friends, we got some very important information to share with you today. It appears as though the United States has now greenlit the Ukrainian military to conduct strikes deep within Russia, even if it means on their nuclear triad. What John Kirby has said in the last 24 hours is profound and is going to have drastic implications, and that is why the NATO chief is saying that World War III is right around the corner. This is massive. Now, before we talk about the antibiotic shortages, before we talk about the Wagner Group taking a serious hit right now in Luhansk, they just had their barracks targeted, a major win for Ukraine, and of course this is going to prompt a major response by the Russians. We have millions of people now in the dark. Odessa is totally in the dark, likely for months. This is massive. The Ukrainian winter refugee crisis has officially begun today. We also have the Iranians aligning themselves more closely with the Russians. Are the Russians actually going to provide them with nuclear weapons? The Israelis are being told they need to give up their nukes by the United Nations. We got war breaking out in Serbia and Kosovo. We have the Danish bank Saxo predicting that we're going full-blown war economy mode in 2023. I'm going to detail all of their predictions for you today. We have gun rights activists concerned around the world with respect to what is going on with credit card companies limiting purchases. We have Germany banning firearms after the supposed far-right coup attempt. We have the Ukrainian military gearing up. The U.S. is going to be sending everything from tanks to Predator drones. This is World War III, my friends, and you need to start getting prepared right now. We have natural gas prices spiking on the West Coast, among other things. But before we dive into this, I want you to do two things. If you haven't got a Jace medical kit yet, go through the link in the description and get yourself an emergency supply of antibiotics, okay? Because right now there are antibiotic shortages everywhere. And this is due to all of the bottlenecks, the bullwhip effect from the pandemic, people's immune systems, just new illnesses that are circulating. There's a shortage, and one of the biggest killers before modern medicine was infection, bacterial infection. And right now with Jace Medical, they've simplified the process so that if you do get a cut or, the grid goes down and you get an infection, you don't have to die or lose a limb as a result of it. You get your complete kit with a variety of different prescription medications. They walk you through the process. This is totally legal, approved by the government. You can get it in Canada and the United States. You actually consult with a doctor, but it's a streamlined process. Very simple. I just wanted to remind people about that with all of these antibiotic shortages going on. And I'll also say that, guys, in the next week, we're going to show you how you don't have to bug out. Earlier today, we released a video about very heavy-duty military-grade style tent for winter bug out. But you don't have to bug out, okay? There's many ways that you can keep your home warm without propane. You are going to need a fuel source, but for most people, wood is an abundantly available fuel source that's non-volatile. It's easy to store. You can order it off Craigslist or Kijiji. So we would encourage you to tune in because we're going to show you how to do this in such a way where you're not going to have to make any modifications to your home. It's going to be quick. It's going to be painless. And in an emergency, you can bust out your wood stove and you can basically put it in your home and it's going to function safely and efficiently, okay? So stick around for that. Now, where should we start today? Let's start with the main thing that I know is on people's minds, and that is the whole Ukraine-Russia conflict, the new Cold War, and of course, World War III, and the implications with respect to the use of nuclear weapons. Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Moscow, Russia, has said, we are increasing our most powerful means of destruction. Okay, they are openly now, they've been talking about expanding the production of their Sarmat missiles and their other nuclear strategic capabilities for some time. Now it's very explicit. A lot of people have been talking about how, well, Putin has been making these nuclear threats throughout the entire year. This is wrong. In fact, he hasn't made as explicit of threats as he's made in the past week as ever, in my recollection anyways. He's talked sort of tangentially about maybe making allusions to possibly to nuclear weapons. He's talked about his nuclear weapons, but he's never actually said that we would use them in the way that he said we would use them this week. They're talking about doing preemptive nuclear strikes as being on the table, and this, of course, is on the heels that there was this revelation that Merkel and NATO were planning a war against Russia for many, many years, and they were just using the Minsk agreement to hide behind, to buy more time for Ukraine to build up its military. Putin has explicitly stated now, and it's important to understand that Putin has never talked like this before, okay? Dmitry Medvedev has talked like this before, but not Putin. Here's what Putin said. He said, nothing will remain of the enemy if Russia is attacked. Hundreds of missiles with nuclear warheads on them will be launched, and it will be impossible to stop them. Dmitry Peskov, okay, the press secretary of Moscow, has said that we have reached a point of confrontation with the West. This is a direct quote. It doesn't get more direct than this. The U.S. has also greenlit attacks in Russia, according to an anonymous Pentagon source, as reported by The Times. I believe that's the Eurasia Times. John Kirby, however, denies this. However, he says that it's up to Ukraine what they do with the weapon systems that they have at their disposal. Okay, the implication here is that this is a tacit approval for the use of whatever means possible to attack deep within Russia. So they're not publicly encouraging or endorsing, or they claim enabling Ukraine to do these things, even though there has been intelligence leaks on the Russian side, according to the Russians, that indicate and implicate British and United States forces are involved in the recent attacks on the bomber base at Engels Air Force Base in Russia. Okay, now the only thing that has changed is that the United States thinks that it's less likely that it will escalate into a conflict, which is why they are pushing the envelope. Okay, they are pushing and pushing and pushing. Eventually, they are going to cross the red line. They say that they're not worried about this escalating to the nuclear level. Well, how can they not be concerned about that when they're literally assisting and, by many people's accounts, enabling the Ukrainians to target the Russian nuclear triad? Meanwhile, you have Jens Stoltenberg saying that the conflict could escalate, and he fears that the Ukraine war will spiral out of control and become a major war between NATO and Russia. So two things to make note of. Dmitry Peskov has said explicitly and unequivocally that we've reached a point of confrontation with the West. Okay? And you have Jens Stoltenberg saying conflict could escalate, and I fear that the war in Ukraine will spiral out of control and become a major war between NATO and Russia. That is as explicit as it gets. Meanwhile, on the front lines, you have the Wagner Group, who had its barracks hit extremely hard. I believe that was in Melitopol, and there was another attack in Luhansk, I believe. They struck, according to Ukrainians, they struck the headquarters of Russia's Wagner mercenary group in western Ukraine. Apparently, there was a lot of people who died in this attack. So this was scored as a major win for Ukraine. Of course, the Kremlin is downplaying it. The Wagner has been most instrumental on the Eastern Front, particularly in the Donbass. Okay, they've done a significant amount of the fighting. These are a very established mercenary group who are arguably, they've seen more action than the Russian military throughout this entire thing. Okay, so that's very, very substantial. Now, in Odessa, they're saying that the power is going to take 2 to 3 months for complete restoration. This is a complete citywide blackout. We're talking about 1.5 million people in the dark. Now, the only thing Ukraine has going for it right now is that it's unseasonably warm. This crazy jet stream breakdown business is affecting everywhere differently. Ukraine has fluctuated between being anomalous in on the cold end of the spectrum and on the hot end of the spectrum. Right now, it is warmer than usual, meaning that people can still survive. Once it gets below zero, that's when it gets incredibly difficult to basically support such a large population of people. People can find ways to keep warm, but once you go below 0 degrees Celsius, it's incredibly difficult, okay? So authorities walked back some remarks that suggested they were encouraging a mass evacuation. They walked it back because, of course, they don't want to create a panic, and they said, we haven't officially called for an evacuation, but they kind of did. So they're hoping that people are going to read between the lines. People with the means to evacuate the place are going to get out. They're saying that you should retreat to the greater Odessa Oblast region. I don't really know what that entails, going out into the countryside and living in cabins that may or may not exist that are heated with coal or wood stoves. I don't know. They simply do not have enough warm shelters to support the entirety of the population. So that situation is developing, and it's not a coincidence that all of these major critical infrastructural attacks are happening right as we approach the official turn of winter. Winter is December 21st officially. That's when, of course, things are going to start to get really, really cold in a lot of these regions. And that is when the pressure is going to be on both sides, and we're going to see the ratcheting up of tensions. Unfortunately, this war is going to continue on for a long time. And as we're going to talk about, the entire global economy is going to be impacted and shaped by this war in the future. The best thing you can do for you and your family is just keep on focusing on preparedness. Be frugal with your purchases. Purchase only the things that you need. Any sort of frivolous spending you might want to reconsider unless there is a functional reason to do so, okay? Unless it's going to really benefit you or have some sort of return on your investment in some way, shape, or form. Right now, people have been a little bit exhausted with respect to the whole preparedness thing, but prepping is really a long-form investment. You're long when you're prepper, okay? You're thinking about things going bad while everything is good. And that's the whole idea of is that you are trying to utilize whatever means are available to you currently to hopefully insulate yourself against hard times that may well be ahead and are undeniably going to be ahead at this point. You have Russia and Iran heading for a full defensive partnership. Okay, Russia is going to be offering unprecedented military support in return for hundreds of ballistic missiles and more of these drones. Apparently, Russia is planning on sending S-400 and Su-35, maybe possibly Su-57, which I think they only have 4 of right now that are currently operational. So I highly doubt they're going to be sending Su-57 to Iran in the thick of a major conflict. But what this shows is that they will be parting ways with some of their S-400 and quite possibly wanting to share nuclear secrets and help Iranians develop their nuclear program. Some suspect that it was North Korea and China and Russia who helped North Korea basically gain a functional ICBM nuclear program. And Russia and China and Iran both need each other right now, and it looks as though that relationship is going to be deepening in the near future. We have a war breaking out in Serbia and Kosovo. We're going to get back to Ukraine in a second. I don't really know a whole lot about this situation, but for the first time since 1999, Serbia has officially submitted a request for the full implementation of Resolution 1244, which, among other things, provides the return of Kosovo to Kosovo of 1,000 members of the Serbian security forces. Alexander Vucic said he had no illusions and knew that the request would be rejected. While he said the appeal to legitimacy would guide Serbia's future moves on the Kosovo issue. This, of course, signals that there may well be a conflict there on the horizon. Now, with respect to Ukraine, they're saying that they're running out of Soviet-era equipment, but there are suspicions that they may be getting Abrams tanks. Now, Poland is already building the infrastructure to support these Abrams tanks. And by infrastructure, of course, we mean facilities that can repair these tanks and troops who are trained how to use them. They're already awaiting around 350 up to 700, as well as thousands of other pieces of equipment from the United States and South Korea. The implication is that this is the first step towards Ukraine getting Abrams tanks. There's also been a lot of calls by U.S. legislatures to give Ukrainians drones. That's MQ-9 Reaper drones and MQ-1C Grey Eagle drones. They want to send these there because the Turkish Bayraktar drones are proving to be ineffective now that the Russians are deploying and not holding back with their missile defense. They were very effective at the start of the war, especially when the Russians were trying to take Kiev at the beginning, or what they were what they would call fixing the Ukrainians in place, although some people think that they just lost that conflict. Regardless, we also have long-range weapon systems that are potentially on the table. John Kirby has said that nothing is off the table, and this, of course, is a major point of escalation. Russia claims, and according to some anonymous sources, Russian soldiers claim that they're not in a position to counter these types of drone strikes. They're saying that only 1 in 4 in Russia support the war effort, according to leaked Kremlin polls. And if these attacks on Russian critical infrastructure or the nuclear triad become more commonplace, they're not going to be able to necessarily defend against it. I'm not sure why that is in particular. If they can't defend against these drone strikes, then nobody in the world can, because supposedly Russia has the most advanced air defense system in the world. What that means is that these types of attacks are going to become more and more commonplace, and eventually a line is going to get crossed, and there's going to be a major response. Now, there's this other conspiracy going around that maybe Putin has an escape plan. It's called codename Noah's Ark, okay? And this is Putin's plan for going and hiding in Venezuela and Argentina. This could be totally made up stuff by the Western MSM. It's hard to say. Regardless, that is the current military situation with respect to Ukraine. They are getting a lot more support from NATO. The war is only intensifying. This is why we need to continue to prepare. And for that reason, the Danish investment bank Saxo, who predicted the current Cold War state of affairs, high state of tension between East and West in late 22, is now making some very bold predictions. Okay, they're saying that 2023 will shock the world with its wartime economic policies. We talked earlier in the year, I made a dedicated video about the war economy and how this is the one way that they may be able to bring us out of this very dire economic time that's ahead. According to the bank, they say any hope for disinflationary environment is impossible due to a war economy. Now, right now, inflation projections, at least on the wholesale front, fell short of expectations, meaning they were a little bit worse than expected for this month, while we are still seeing what's called disinflation, not to be confused with deflation. So disinflation is when there's still inflation, but it's less than it was the month before. Deflation is where prices are actually going down across the board relative to the baseline, which of course they are far from doing that. What they're saying, though, is any hope for disinflationary environment is impossible because you're going to have all countries in the world trying to shore up their own national security. That means buying energy, supplies, and raw materials. All of the stuff that people need, countries are going to continue to hoard, okay? Whether it's China, African countries, Western countries, everybody's going to be trying to hoard food and the stuff that they need to fuel their war machine, which tend to be all of the essential materials, fuel, metals, fertilizers, things of that nature. So that means that the prices of these things are going to continue to surge and not be offset by any sort of recessionary pressure. So even if people don't have money to spend, they're always going to need energy in order to survive. They're always going to need food. While energy might come down marginally as a result of people buying less crap they don't need, it's unlikely that it's going to come down in a way which is going to offset all of these increased costs due to every country in the world arming up. At least that's one perspective. This bank also predicts that the price of gold is going to surge by to $3,000 an ounce, which is about 40% more than it is right now. They predict de-dollarization by China and India, which of course will weaken the dollar, which may contribute to some of that $3,000 projected price point. And they also predict, they make an interesting prediction here, that one country, they don't say which one, is going to ban meat, but that's not until 2030, okay, for all you WF bros out there. Gun rights activists are complaining. They're saying, and we've been saying this for a long time, that credit card companies are restricting purchases of firearms. There was a new change recently to firearm and ammo specific merchant category code. Okay, so this was all about helping the authorities track and trace firearms that were sold online. This was a joint effort by credit card companies, and a lot of people, of course, have a lot to say about this as is. But, I mean, that's something that maybe you could massage people into accepting. However, customers are now claiming that their cards are being declined as banks are refusing to allow customers to use their cards for this type of merchant, i.e., somebody who sells firearms. Now, we've had our run-ins with PayPal in the past. We don't sell anything that is legally considered a firearm, at least not in our country. We've sold things like crossbows, bear deterrents, various flares and things of that nature. But we have also at one point had our account suspended. PayPal froze all of our funds for nearly 6 months. We had to go through the Better Business Bureau to finally have this thing lifted. Meanwhile, the currency at that time, because this was during the pandemic, the currency had declined significantly. So when we finally did get our money back, it was worth like 20% less. Anyways, we're going to continue to see these attempts to stifle people who are law-abiding citizens from owning and possessing and acquiring firearms. Germany has also pledged to enforce stricter gun laws after a far-right plot. I always do this because I don't know all the details. It may well be exactly what they're saying it is. Go and do your own research. Apparently, there was a far-right attempt to, or I shouldn't say attempt, but plan to overthrow the state. According to Interior Minister Nancy Faeser, the government will tighten gun laws and ban numerous firearms. They're saying that the member of that organization that was going to attempt to overthrow the government was numbered in around 23,000. And I believe it was, 50 to 100 people who were doing a lot of the administrative stuff. So again, don't know much about it, but all I know is they're going to use it as an excuse, as they always do, to crack down against law-abiding citizens. Why? Well, use your imagination. In England, 16 million people are going to be unable to heat their homes, largely due to cost of living and just not having, not being paid enough, I suppose, a stagflationary type environment where your wages aren't keeping pace with commodities inflation. So the government is going to be permitting 3,300 warm-up spaces. It's always a weird number like that. They don't, if they had real PR people working on this, they would know that anytime you use the number 33, the numerologists on the Illuminati crowd are going to get all crazy because they think that that's a very significant number. Anyways, England is going to be setting up 3,300 warm-up spaces. And 16 million people are going to be able to hopefully get warm if they're not able to afford home. Jeez. It's been a long week, and I had a couple nights ago. We had a bit of a staff party here because you got to still try to have fun, guys. But yeah, if people cannot afford to heat their homes, they can go to one of these 3,300 warm-up spaces. Canadians are choosing cheaper, less healthy foods and skipping medications to cut costs, according to a new poll. You know, you can get all your staple carbs, grains, and stuff like that from the wholesale places where the restaurants shop. We've done several videos on that. And if you're doing gardening during the spring and summer, I mean, that's all mostly free after you make the initial investment. And once you have the fertilizer, and if you can get a good compost system going, you can really grow food with almost no inputs aside water. And hopefully weather permitting, of course. But yeah, I mean, there's ways to shop and there's ways to survive that are far more frugal. And obviously, people's priorities are going to have to be restructured. That means maybe not spending as much money on things that you really probably don't need, finding more cheaper methods of entertainment. And, you know, as the saying goes, the best things in life are most definitely free. So something to consider. Antibiotic shortages. Countries across Europe are reporting shortages of antibiotics as demand for medicine rises and manufacturers grapple with supply chain snags. So we have amoxicillin, cephalosporins, and other widely used antibiotics are in short supply. Data from various countries show. And this is due largely to manufacturers who are facing delays in the supply of ingredients from China, as well as packaging and other components. This is largely due to China's lockdowns, and of course, rising energy costs are making some energy-intensive production difficult to maintain. So it's all connected, folks, to the big conflict that is going on right now and is only going to get worse. Feel free, if you enjoy a little break from this type of doomy, gloomy content, go check out the video released earlier today. And just so you know, we are releasing more short type content now, just because that's what YouTube is, that's the way it's going. And you know, you can't really fight the future. It's a losing battle. So we're going to keep doing the videos like we're doing the long form stuff. We're never going to stop doing that. So don't be afraid if you start seeing us doing more short type content or clips of our videos. It's not going to take away. We have somebody working on that. Just, you know, that's their whole job, is just doing the short end of things. So it's in no way going to take attention away from this. Because personally, I don't like the shorts. I think that it's like a slot machine, you know, it's just like dopamine. And unfortunately, there's a lot of great ideas on there, but people never act on those ideas because it's just you watch one and then you watch another, and before you know it, you've wasted hours and hours and hours. But that said, you know, like I say, you're not going to be able to fight the future. Okay, so you also have to adapt. That's one of the biggest things with being a content creator. I've always hated those terms because they're so dry and lifeless. But it's one of the biggest things with being a content creator is you cannot be afraid to change. And it's just part of survival in general. So feel free to continue to check out our more perennial evergreen style content. Most of that is indicated by a blue strip on the side instead of a red. And yeah, I know I've asked a lot from you in this video, but we also have a new TikTok account as well that we're starting to get set up. So feel free to check that out. But quite frankly, it's going to be the same stuff we post here on YouTube Shorts. So I'd encourage you to stick around here instead. But hey, if you want to give all your information to the Chinese, go get a TikTok account. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.